Hey everyone! For decades, numerous scenes have been cut from Spider-Man movies. Some of them were rightfully deleted because they didn't contribute anything significant to the story and only slowed down the plot. However, many other moments should have been kept, so in this video I decided to find out how all of the Spider-Man movies would look if the creators have left in every deleted moment. To do this, we will integrate them into the plot in chronological order and see if the Spider-Man movies would improve thanks to the deleted material. Spider-Man 3 talks about the alternative version of Spider-Man 3, also known as Sam Raimi's director's cut, have been circulating since probably 2007, when the movie was first released in theaters. Spider-Man 3 wasn't liked by anyone back then, not by critics, not by regular viewers, so it immediately started receiving a lot of criticism. It later became known that not only did the producers cut the film, but they also didn't allow the director to realize many of his creative ideas, forcing him to insert unnecessary plotlines and characters disliked by Sam Raimi himself. That's why fans of The Friendly Neighborhood are so interested in the question, was the director's cut of the film better than the theatrical one, and whether it addressed the problems and plot holes of Spider-Man 3. So our story, just like in the theatrical version, begins with the demonstration of Peter Parker, who has changed in the previous movie, confident but blinded by his own fame and the success of being Spider-Man.
People really like me.
Hey, stick around, it's gonna start again in a couple minutes.
New York finally acknowledged its hero, which was more extensively shown in the deleted scenes. In the park, a boy was mimicking Spider-Man, swinging upside down on a rope, but his mom was taking him down from there. Meanwhile, Parker, after revealing his identity to Osborn, when Harry tore off the hero's mask and began to think that Peter killed his father, tried repeatedly to discuss this with Harry. He came to Oscorp to see his best friend. However, Parker was not allowed by the security. By the way, this happened after their unsuccessful dialogue during Mary Jane's performance at the theater. In his mansion, Osborn experienced hallucinations. Norman appeared to him, urging his son to avenge Spider-Man. It was this vision that influenced Harry's decision to inhale the goblin gas. Just a reminder that simultaneously, we were introduced to the fugitive criminal Flint Marko, trying to somehow get money for his sick daughter's treatment, and an extraterrestrial symbiote that eventually found its way to Spider-Man's home. So the Goblin Jr. took off to seek revenge. A battle ensued between him and Peter. However, the Friendly Neighborhood emerged as the winner, and Harry fell into a coma, acquiring amnesia. This villain was temporarily taken out of the plot. Flint, fleeing from the police, accidentally fell into a super collider, transforming into Sandman. By the way, a few frames were also cut from here. Now they are shown on your screen. The antagonist then headed to Dr. Wallace, a biologist working on curing Marco's daughter. Flint forced him to continue developing the cure, but it required a substantial amount of money, so the doctor requested a certain sum of dollars. Meanwhile, the symbiote at Parker's home absorbed a real spider, killing the arachnid. A symbolic moment. The creators were clearly hinting at the upcoming events in the film. That is the future struggle between the light and dark sides of Spider-Man. Next, the audience was introduced to another set of characters, Eddie Brock and Gwen Stacy, as well as her father, the police captain. According to the plot, the girl got into trouble and was on the verge of death, but Peter saved her, while Eddie just took photos of Gwen for the Daily Bugle, and at the Jamesons' office, he gave Brock and Parker a task.
Spider-Man with his hand in a cookie jar. Whoever brings me that photo gets a job.
A couple of days later, a ceremony was held in New York to present Spider-Man with the keys of the city for his heroic deed, saving the daughter of the police captain. Peter himself also attended as a photographer. By the way, in one of the deleted scenes, we were again shown a boy in a Spidey costume running up to Parker and shooting him with the toy web shooter. In response, Peter released a real weapon at the kid, then put on his suit and flew to receive the key to the city. He was so blinded by his own fame that he even kissed Gwen Stacy in front of Mary Jane and Eddie Brock. A split-second frame of Eddie's surprise at what he saw was shown in the movie trailer. Suddenly, a sandstorm appeared out of nowhere, sweeping everything in its path. In a cutscene, Spidey saved a child from the sandstorm, then went in pursuit of the villain. Marko, getting into an armored car, began to master his ability there. That was briefly shown in the deleted footage. However, after the fight with the Friendly Neighborhood, he had to go into hiding. Later that evening, Peter had a quarrel with MJ at the restaurant over his kiss with Gwen at the city key ceremony. Mary Jane, true to her style, instantly went to Harry, and then some unclear dialogues took place between them. However, all of these conversations were removed from the movie. After some time, Peter and Aunt May were summoned to the police station, because investigators found the real killer of Uncle Ben. It turned out to be Flint Marko. Realizing who it was, the web-slinger immediately starts searching for him. Days and nights pass with Peter having one thought in his mind, to avenge his uncle's killer. And when the hero finally falls asleep, the symbiote attacks him, and Parker acquires a new suit. Judging by the concept art, around this time the Sandman was robbing a bank, which was supposed to be shown in an unreleased scene. The police reported this crime on the radio, and Spider-Man set out after him. A brutal fight ensued in the subway. By the way, a couple of fragments were also cut here, where Peter beat the antagonist with some rubber and severely battered his face. In the end, Spider-Man managed to defeat Marco, washing him away into the sewer. Now the hero believed that he had killed Flint Marco. Then came the moment with the screamer. Well, as for Harry Osborn, after the encounter with MJ, his memory finally started to return. So when the girl came home, he caught her off guard and forced her to break up with Peter. Meanwhile, Peter, seated in his room, seemed to be tempted to put on the black suit. He eagerly stared at the box where the symbiote resided, as if it was calling to him. Here, the director clearly indicated that the suit was like a drug. Once you have it, you can't do without it. Next came the breakup of Peter and MJ, absorbed by Harry, who smiled slyly. So, realizing that it was Osborn who orchestrated all this, Spider-Man decides to settle the score with the Green Goblin. In the evening, he comes to Harry's house, inexplicably lying down on the couch. A fight ensues between the old friends, during which Parker detonates a bomb of Harry's own, emerging victorious from the conflict. However, the problems don't end there. Eddie Brock, in order to get a job at the Daily Bugle, falsified Spider-Man's crime, prompting Peter to provide undeniable evidence to Jameson, thereby destroying the rival's career. Jonah has to publish a retraction. In addition, in one of the deleted scenes, he tells Betty Brant that he never issued retractions at all, but as she later claimed, that's a complete lie. After Brock is fired from the editorial office, Spider-Man triumphantly, and with shouts, soared through New York in the symbiotic suit. On the same day, Eddie came for support to Gwen, but she chased him away, saying she never wanted to see him again. After that, Captain Stacy himself threatened him. Then, in desperation, Brock wandered the city streets, until he stumbled upon Peter and Gwen, who were going to a restaurant for a date. By the way, MJ worked there too. Under the influence of the symbiote, Parker even struck his ex-girlfriend. This was a point of no return. That night, he decides to finally get rid of the parasite, coming to the church for that purpose, where Brock also appeared. As Spider-Man was completely getting rid of the symbiote, it latched onto Eddie, thus Venom was born. Meanwhile, the Sandman emerged from the sewer, regaining a human form. Immediately, he went to check on his daughter in the form of a sandcastle, after which he made a promise to himself.
I swear to you, you won't stop me again.
Because of Spider-Man, Flint has still been unable to get the money for Penny's treatment. Suddenly, Brock appears to Marco with an offer to form an alliance to once and for all deal with the Spider. Realizing that he simply has no other choice if he wants to save his daughter's life, Flint decides to agree. To grab Peter's attention, Venom takes MJ hostage and hangs on a giant web at a tremendous height. Seeing the girl on the news, Parker seeks help from Osborn in the fight against the villains, but Osborn refuses. When Spider-Man swings away, Harry takes their old photo depicting him with Peter and Mary Jane. After him contemplating, the butler approaches him and suddenly begins to tell the guy the truth about his father's death. In reality, Parker is not to blame for his death at all. Everything happened solely because of Norman himself, so Harry decides to help his friend after all. He saves the friendly neighborhood at the last minute. Meanwhile, Flint's wife, Emma, and their daughter Penny saw on TV what Parker was doing, and they decided to stop him. At the scene of final battle was Dr. Phil Wallace. There, he met Captain Stacy and Gwen. Then, the biologist told them that he knew who the Sandman really was. At that moment, Emma and her daughter arrived. After a short conversation with the doctor, they all set out to find Marco. During the battle, Harry perished at the hands of Venom. However, Peter still managed to defeat the symbiote and separate Eddie from it. Yet, all that remained of Brock was a pile of bones, as his skin had fused too deeply with Venom. As a result, the symbiote lunged at Spider-Man, attempting to engulf the hero, but in vain. Parker managed to break free and permanently destroy Venom. However, the battle was far from over. Right away, the Sandman arrived and began to beat Spider-Man. Fortunately for Peter, the antagonist was stopped by his daughter. She pleaded with her father to stop. Phil Wallace informed them that Penny was incurably ill and couldn't be saved. Apologizing to Parker, they left. After Osborn's funeral, there was the customary flight of the Spider in the film's finale. In reality, these scenes don't fundamentally fix all the problems and flaws of Spider-Man 3, although they do handle many moments and plot twists much better. This once again proves that the main issue with Spider-Man 3 lies solely in its script. The Amazing Spider-Man. Surprisingly, there's also quite a bit of deleted material in Garfield's Spider-Man origin, so right now, let's take a look at its director cut. The film opens with a scene of Peter saying goodbye to his parents, who are moving somewhere, leaving their young son with Uncle Ben and Aunt May. It's been about 10 years since then. Parker is in high school already, skateboarding, often falling off, but he doesn't really have friends, although he has a kind heart. Heck, he only met Gwen after Flash beat him up. Also, the hero is still trying to find any information about his parents and their disappearance, which leads him to find Richard's briefcase, who used to work at Oscorp with Kurt Connors. To find more information, Peter heads to Oscorp. Meeting Gwen and Connors there, he sneaks into a secret laboratory after glimpsing the password from Rajit Radha. Inside, Parker sees where they are breeding many spiders. Some of them even fall right onto him. After that, he makes a quick escape, and two scientists notice him, but don't do anything about it. Later, one of the radioactive spiders bites Peter, resulting in him gaining new abilities. Meanwhile, Radha asks Kurt to expedite the development of the cure for the dying Norman Osborn, and Peter runs to the amusement park to test his powers, even climbing on the Ferris wheel, jumping between cabins like a real spider. Moving on with the plot, the protagonist visits Connors and they try to derive a formula to regenerate lost limbs. The scientist invites Peter to visit his laboratory. Parker agrees, which makes him come home late and forget to pick up Aunt May from work, despite his uncle asking him to do so. They argue with Ben and Peter leaves home. Then he heads to the store to buy milk, and he's short 1 cent, and the cashier rudely kicks him out. Right after that, a robber steals money from the cash register. Parker could have stopped him, but chose not to, all to get back at the cashier. By the way, this is where the alternative scene of Uncle Ben's death should come in, but the only significant difference from the theatrical version is that they don't show the actual killing of Uncle Ben. You only hear a gunshot. Well, in the end, Ben dies. Peter, upon finding out who is responsible, starts actively searching for him, even making himself a costume, and spends his evenings catching some street criminals. One day after school, Parker meets Connors near his house. Connors shows him a mouse that grew a paw thanks to their medicine, then says,
We must be greater than what we suffer.
Eventually, Peter finally creates the Spider-Man costume and invents web shooters. Of course, the police don't like his activities, so they put out a search for Spider-Man. Meanwhile, Parker accidentally notices Kurt on the street, who was walking suspiciously somewhere, and decides to follow him, but suddenly he loses sight of him. As for Connors, he is once again pressured by Rajit Radha, who plans to test the unfinished drug on humans. The doctor strongly objects, but no one listens to him. Due to the scientist's disobedience, he is later fired. This prompts Kurt to test the serum on himself. Meanwhile, Parker goes to Gwen for dinner, after which he confesses to her that he is Spider-Man, and Connors, after injecting himself with the medicine, wakes up with his hand restored and rushes to tell Radha about it. But his boss has already headed to the Veterans Hospital. Kurt goes to stop Radha, but on the way, he mutates and turns into the Lizard, becoming aggressive. He attacks Radha, but Spider-Man intervenes, causing the lizard to retreat. Connors hides in the sewers. Peter learns that it's Kurt transforming into a huge reptile and informs the police. At the same time, the scientist meets his son and tells him that he will be moving for some time. Then the villain returns to his sewer laboratory. Parker tracks down the lizard, leading to a battle where Connors learns Spider-Man's secret identity. In the evening, Peter has a date with Gwen right at the clock tower, where in the second movie the girl dies. Meanwhile, the scientist goes insane, looking at his hand, which is like Freddy Krueger. The next day, he sneaks into Peter's school through a toilet, horrifying two girls, after which he once again confronts Parker in battle, but the lizard has to run because the police arrive. Actually, there's an alternative ending to the fight, where Peter takes Connors somewhere. However, it doesn't go any further, as it's unknown what would have happened next. Meanwhile, Radha tracks the doctor's location by hacking his tablet, and Parker finds the lizard's hideout, where he's conducting an experiment. The hero tries to persuade and reason with Kurt, but he remains adamant, so he injects himself with the serum again. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Radha appears and shoots Connors, simultaneously paralyzing Peter. Then he tries to take Peter away, but the scientist manages to transform into the lizard, causing Radha to lose his head. The antagonist then begins to carry out his plans, turning all of New York into lizards. However, naturally, Spider-Man along with Captain Stacy stops him, and the city is saved, but the policeman had to sacrifice himself. Before dying, he asked Peter not to involve Gwen in these superhero affairs and to break up with her. Spider-Man promised him that. Upon returning home, Peter has a conversation with his aunt, where she is surprised by her nephew's caring nature, showing that the hero has changed and grown compared to the beginning of the movie. However, he still breaks the promise given to Captain Stacy and continues his relationship with Gwen, leading to the events of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. In principle, some deleted scenes from the first movie of the duology really make the movie better. For example, Connor's conversation with his son, Radha's death, and Parker's date with Gwen at the clock tower, so they were worth keeping. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Deleted scenes from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, probably the most discussed topic around the movie throughout its existence. To this day, many wonder what TSM2 looked like originally, and most importantly, was the director's cut of the film better than the theatrical version? Since the sequel's release with Garfield's Spidey, a huge amount of deleted material about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has appeared online. What was the director's uncut version of Mark Webb's film like? Right now, we are going to fully dissort it together. So, the movie begins with the farewell of Mary and Richard Parker to Peter, and then their flight on the plane, which crashes. In a deleted moment, Richard takes a gun from the killer and goes to check if the pilot is dead. Trying to lift him up, he accidentally pushes the steering wheel down, which ultimately causes the plane to crash. Years later, during Spider-Man's chase of Alexei Satsevich, Peter jumps over police cars to catch the robber. At the same time, he saved the lives of Oscorp employee Max Dillon, for which Max is incredibly grateful. After capturing Satsevich and receiving diplomas at graduation, Flash approaches Parker and Gwen, thanking them for their help in preparing for exams, then hugs Peter and leaves. Later that evening, Parker and Stacy part ways as Peter couldn't forget the promise he made to her father.
So I want you to promise me something, okay? Leave Gwen out of it.
And then the creators showed Spider-Man's ordinary routine, among which there was also supposed to be a scene of Peter meeting Mary Jane Watson, his new neighbor, who happens to be a Spidey fan. Her father is a cruel alcoholic, and MJ herself works as a waitress. In her free time, she enjoys building motorcycles. Apparently, she liked Peter. Meanwhile, Max Dillon celebrates his own birthday with his mother. Well, it's more accurate to say Max Dillon celebrates his birthday alone.
It's a special day today. Do you have anything special that you want to say to me on my special day?
The same thing I tell you every day. You're a dummy.
Suddenly, the power goes out at Max's home, and his mother's respirator stops working. When her son restores the electricity, he approaches her to remind her about his birthday, but she either forgot about it or simply doesn't care, so she asks Dylan to bring her cigarettes. In fact, filmmakers made a mistake by cutting out Electro's mom, as it would have helped develop the villain much better. By the way, Max doesn't have much luck at work either, as his colleagues treat him like dirt.
Happy birthday.
He remains alone to do their duties, which leads him to fall into a tank with electric eels. Meanwhile, Harry Osborn bids farewell to his father before his death, due to an incurable hereditary disease, which has now been passed on to Harry. After that, he becomes the head of Oscorp. Peter learns about Norman's death and decides to visit his old friend. When they finally meet, Harry tells Parker about his illness, and the friends discuss Spider-Man.
Kinda like to think it gives people hope.
For what?
Maybe eventually everything's gonna be alright.
I just wish I had time for eventually.
After Max fell into the tank with electric eels, he transformed into Electro. An Oscorp agent delivered Dylan's body to some psycho, insisting that everything should remain secret. Upon touching Max, he receives a powerful electric shock, thus awakening him. Later in the plot, Electro comes home and sees his supposedly sick mother walking. Moreover, she receives money after her son's death. In reality, she was just using him to take care of her. Crushed and broken, he heads to Times Square. At this time, Peter was spending time with Gwen, and she confessed to him that she was planning to apply to Oxford. Then Spider-Man flew to stop the rebellious Electro. There was a confrontation between them, after which Max ended up in Ravencroft, where experiments were conducted on him, and Dylan harbored a deep resentment towards Spider-Man. Back at his home, Parker, after another superhero day, just lies down and feels sad about Gwen's upcoming move to England, and she, in parallel, is also upset about it. Honestly, it's unclear why this moment was cut. There are no lines here, just the character's emotions. The next day, Harry invites Peter to Oscorp for a very important conversation. He shows his friend a life support exoskeleton and says that Peter can save his life.
Check it out.
Amazing joint flexibility. Like, what are you using? Using servo motors?
No, it's electrically conductive nanofibers. Any battlefield injury, a broken leg, gunshot wound, the suit pretty much does the walking for you while it heals your body.
he then reveals that Parker has been watched since early childhood. Norman kept an eye on every step the boy took, just in case Richard appeared. Additionally, Osborn showcases an old video made by their fathers many years ago, in which they talk about genetically modified spiders that in theory can cure humanity of dozens of diseases, including Harry's condition. Therefore, Osborn asks Peter to bring Spider-Man to him, as he knows the hero is acquainted with him through his photos for the Daily Bugle, though hesitantly, the protagonist agrees. Eventually, Spider-Man himself arrives to Harry and refuses to provide his blood, thus taking away Osborn's last hope. Then Peter set in despair on the rooftop. By the way, that rope tied around Parker's neck is not what you're thinking about. Actually, Spider-Man once saved MJ from her drunken father, who was beating her, and then wrapped him up in a cocoon of webbing. Meanwhile, in his office, Harry, digging up secret files, learns about Electro and his whereabouts. Donald Mencken forcefully ejects him from Oscorp and suspends him from business. Harry decides to free Dylan from Ravencroft. Meanwhile, Gwen comes to Peter to tell him that she has indeed been accepted to Oxford and is moving to England. However, he is not home, so Stacy asks Aunt May to pass on the message. Interestingly, after this conversation, Gwen strikes up a dialogue with Mary Jane. MJ tells Gwen that she always has bad luck with guys, and she always attracts someone awful. She happens to like Peter, so she asks Gwen where to find someone like him, and Stacy says, "Dating nerd," symbolically giving her approval for their future relationship with Parker. Also, Mary Jane is a big fan of Spider-Man, and she even has a tattoo of him. Well, when Peter returns home, May tells him to hire after Gwen. After all, if he truly loves her, he should catch up with Stacy right now and confess his feelings. Meanwhile, Harry infiltrates Ravencroft and forms an alliance with Electro to put an end to Spider-Man once and for all. Then they visit Donald Mencken and force him to take Osborn to a secret laboratory where all the remaining samples of radioactive spider serum are kept. Once there, after injecting himself with one of them, Harry begins to transform. By the way, the creators removed from the theatrical version the extended and more gruesome transformation of Osborn into the Green Goblin, which you can now see on your screen. Then the Goblin flies off to seek revenge on Mencken. First, he blows up a special forces unit with one of his bombs and tells Felicia Hardy to leave Oscorp, and then he drops Donald Mencken from a great height.
Right. The fall is fast and steep.
As Spider-Man catches up with Gwen, he confesses his love to her and promises that they will go to England together. However, they are interrupted by Electro, causing chaos in New York City. Moving on to the battle between Dylan and Spider-Man, naturally Spidey emerges victorious by overloading Max with energy. Then the second round begins, but this time with the Goblin. Harry grabs Gwen and throws her from a height. Parker catches her, but ultimately fails to save her, and she dies not only because of the Goblin, but also because of Peter himself. It was him who put her in danger, disregarding responsibility. After Stacy's death, consumed with hatred, Parker starts beating Osborn almost to death, but stops just in time. Moreover, Gwen, before dying, tells Peter never to give up. Later, at the grave of his beloved, his father appears to him. Richard advises his son.
With great power comes great responsibility.
By the way, this scene is very emotional.
What? What? Say it! Say what you want to say! What do you want to say? Where you been?
Meanwhile, Gustav Fierce begins preparations to create the Sinister Six. In the deleted scenes, we see the head of Norman Osborn and Venom stored in a container. Actually, many of the deleted moments should have been left. Without them, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 would indeed be poorer, but they don't solve the film's main problems, although they make it better. This means only one thing: the main problem of the film lies solely in its screenplay. Spider-Man Homecoming. Marvel movies, while not known for having very significant or grandiose deleted material, still have some. So let's see what it will look like in all the plots of the trilogy. So, the movie begins 8 years before the main events. Adrian Toomes and his people are deprived of their job by the Department of Damage Control, owned by Tony Stark. Because of this, they have to secretly keep Chitauri technology for themselves, to profit from it later. In 8 years, they have already managed to build a good business out of it, and expand. Meanwhile, we are shown an extended vlog by Peter in Germany, where Parker is swinging with the Chancellor himself. At night, the hero escapes from the hotel to test his new suit, but Happy finds out about it later. Additionally, Spider-Man's participation in Captain America's Civil War was showcased. Since then, only 2 months have passed. Peter is still attending a regular school and trying to prove himself as a superhero to become an Avenger. He has only one friend, Ned Leeds, and Parker has a crush on Liz Allen. Spider-Man constantly performs small heroic deeds, but nothing on a large scale. Peter wants something bigger, so he's in search of more significant criminals than bike thieves. Because of this, Parker comes across Chitauri weapon dealers led by Toomes. He even has a small battle with the Vulture. However, Iron Man saves Parker from it. Then our hero decides to seriously deal with the weapon dealers to stop its distribution, as it causes significant harm to the city. Meanwhile, Peter's school is planning a trip to Washington, where his class is going to participate in the game What Where When. Parker is also invited. Initially, he refuses to go, and his friends tease him with food. Liz also tries to persuade him, but in vain. After some time, Spider-Man learns that the Vulture's lair is actually located near the place where the class is headed, so he decides to go with them. On the way there, they see destroyed helicarrier as they pass by the demolished SHIELD office. By the way, it's quite strange, considering that Captain America's sequel happened a whooping 3 years before Homecoming. They could have cleaned up the helicarrier by then. Well, already in Washington, Peter tracks down Toomes and disrupts his attempt to rob a truck carrying Chitauri technology, causing Adrian to despair. During a conversation with his wife, he says that everything is fine with him, although things are clearly not fine with Toomes. Meanwhile, Parker's classmates, including Liz, get stuck in an elevator at a tremendous height, and Spider-Man saves them all. Almost the entire country hears about this event, including Adrian. Meanwhile, Parker continues to gather information on the Vulture, and he tracks down one of his buyers, Aaron Davis. This character is notable for being Miles Morales' uncle. By the way, in a deleted scene from the movie, Aaron even called Miles and said they wouldn't be able to meet because he was stuck in a parking lot. Then came the moment on the ferry, where Peter once again thwarted Toomes' plans. However, by doing so, he put hundreds of lives in danger. Fortunately, Iron Man, War Machine and Vision arrived just in time. Stark then took away Peter's new suit as punishment, but that didn't stop Spider-Man from finishing what he started, finally catching the Vulture. Ned even tried to talk him out of it, as he was deeply worried about his friend. Right now, there is a school dance where Peter invites Liz. Naturally, she doesn't refuse. At the doorstep of her house, Parker meets her father, who turns out to be Adrian Toomes. As the antagonist drove them to the prom, he recognized by Peter's voice that he is Spider-Man. Toomes threatened him, but didn't kill him, remembering that Spider-Man once saved Liz. However, Parker can't let things slide. That night, the Vulture plans to rob Stark's cargo plane filled with technology, and Peter has to stop him, which he does. During the final battle, Spider-Man even saves the villain from death, and then turns him over to the police. As a gesture of gratitude, the Vulture never reveals Spider-Man's identity. In the end, we see a drawn-out report by Betty Brant, full of silly jokes. Essentially, there were deleted scenes found for Homecoming that should have been kept. Unfortunately, not all of the material can be inserted into the movie's plot, as not every scene was leaked online. For example, a photo where Spider-Man is targeted by multiple laser sights. In this case, let's move on. Spider-Man Far From Home. The movie opens with Spider-Man in his iron suit fighting a group of thugs, after which he is greeted by a swarm of journalists asking the same question.
Are you the head Avenger now? No, I'm not.
Then Parker and Ned walk together down the school corridor, discussing Peter's to-do list before their trip to Europe. Next, the creators show how the hero accomplishes it. First, he goes to get his passport, but finds only one issuing point open. So, using his gadgets, he opens another one. Then goes to Mr. Delmar's shop to buy an adopter, and later sells his old toys to buy a necklace for MJ. By the way, Parker's new love interest is MJ now. Also, the hero starts experiencing problems with his spider sense, so Aunt May helps him train it. Well, during the trip, Peter tries to woo Michelle, and he even faces some competition, but Parker doesn't get a chance to relax, because out of nowhere, during the sightseeing tour in Venice, a water elemental appears and starts wreaking havoc. However, the villain is stopped by Mysterio, who had previously destroyed a couple of such elementals. That same evening, Nick Fury approaches Spidey and asks for help in combating the new threat. Then Spidey meets Mysterio, who is Quentin Beck, supposedly a hero from a parallel universe. However, when Fury asks for Peter's help, he refuses because he can't show up in Europe as Spider-Man, fearing people might discover his secret identity. But Fury doesn't give up. He brings Peter a new suit, and Parker names it Night Monkey. Meanwhile, there was a deleted scene with Peter's class in a shop. In Prague, Night Monkey and Mysterio deal with the fire elemental. Quentin, almost sacrificing himself, completely destroys the monster, and Peter starts seeing Beck as a hero, deciding to give him Stark's unique glasses, which passed to Peter after Iron Man's death. With their help, it becomes possible to control a whole army of combat drones. Consequently, they are all currently under Mysterio's control, who turns out to be not a hero but merely a fraudster and a master of illusions, who wants to gain fame and revenge on Tony, as Stark stole Quentin's technology. When Peter tried to confess his life to Michelle, she told him that she knew he was Spider-Man. Then they accidentally activated Mysterio's illusion, as MJ took one of the drone's projectors, and Parker realized he had been deceived. He tried to tell the truth to Nick Fury, but it was already too late. Mysterio caught Spidey off guard. A battle ensued in which the antagonist emerged victorious, thinking he had killed Peter once and for all, but Parker survived. Later in the plot, Quentin prepared for another deception of Fury and already played out the scene before heading to London, supposedly to deal with an extremely dangerous elemental, but Spider-Man stopped him, ending the drone attack on the city, and when Peter flew home with his class on the plane, he fell asleep next to Michelle, resting his head on her shoulder. At the airport, his aunt greeted him, and he showed her Tony's glasses. His aunt said that Parker truly deserved them. Meanwhile, Quentin staged his death, framing Spidey as the killer and revealing his secret identity to the world, causing major problems for the main character. Well, we are now moving on to the direct continuation of the story. Spider-Man No Way Home. A year after the movie's premiere, Sony released an extended version of the prequel in theaters. It includes all the deleted scenes. The film starts right where Far From Home left off. Now everyone knows that Peter is Spider-Man. Society is divided into two camps, those who support Spidey and Mysterio's supporters. Because of this, Peter faces a lot of problems. He even gets paint thrown at him on the street, even though he helped stop bike thieves. His friends also start facing difficulties. They are all struggling to get into college because of Parker's fame, and at school, all attention is focused on them, especially from the teachers. The gym teacher even makes Peter crawl on walls. Under the pressure of all these problems, the hero decides to seek help from Doctor Strange. They use spells to make everyone forget who is behind Spider-Man's mask, but something goes wrong, and a rift is created in the multiverse. This leads to the appearance of various villains from other cinematic universes. Parker first encounters Dr. Octopus, when he tries to convince the college director to accept his friends. Then, after defeating Octavius, he briefly sees the Green Goblin. After that, Strange tells him to catch the other villains, while Steven has already captured the Lizard. Later in the plot, Spider-Man encounters Electro with Sandman, and the Goblin himself appears to the hero in the guise of the innocent Norman Osborn. Doctor Strange wanted to send each of them back to their own worlds using the magical cube, even though the villains would die immediately after returning, but Parker didn't like the Steven's idea, and he trapped him in the mirror dimension. Peter wanted to help the antagonists by fixing their flaws, and brought them to his home to prepare medicines for everyone. Meanwhile, Happy was with his lawyer Matt Murdock, who was defending him against federal agents. The Green Goblin surprised Parker by attacking him, causing the villains to scatter. The only one Spider-Man managed to cure was Otto Octavius. Due to Spider-Man's irresponsibility, which led extremely dangerous enemies to his home, Osborn killed Aunt May. The magical cube was with Michelle and Ned, who were visited by Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. Together, they found Parker and decided to help the villains after all, finally curing them, even Norman. As a result, they succeeded, and all the characters returned to their worlds. However, to save the entire multiverse, Peter and Strange cast a spell that erased all information about Parker, from databases to the minds of those who knew him. He had to sacrifice this. In the movie's finale, Betty Brant interviewed Peter's circle when they still remembered him. Actually, there is no significant deleted material for No Way Home, unlike other Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man.
Who am I?
You are Peter Parker, living with your uncle and aunt, who is always missed the school bus. Peter himself is a typical nerd and a geek. He has a best friend, Harry Osborn, who initially couldn't care less about Peter himself. Osborn's father is Norman, the owner of the multi-million-dollar Oscorp company, and the main antagonist of the movie. Right now, the high school students are on a field trip to the Insectarium, a place where they keep spiders. But one of these spiders has escaped, and Peter gets bitten. When he returns home, he collapses unconscious on his bed and falls asleep as a wimp but wakes up as a jock. Meanwhile, Norman demonstrates an invitation of Oscorp to the military, but they are not satisfied with it. Norman decides to conduct an experiment on himself. After all, he inhales the green gas. Norman goes insane, and Parker gets his new powers. Coming to school, he accidentally bumps into Flash Thompson. The bully attacks him, but Peter beats Flash effortlessly. After that, he goes to test his new abilities. After school, Harry finds his father on the floor. Norman doesn't remember at all what happened last night. Then they tell him about the stolen suit with the glider, which was being developed by Oscorp. Parker has already rushed into some alley. He tries to climb the nearest wall and he succeeds. Also, Peter starts producing produce an organic weapon straight from his wrists. Late in the evening, he returns home. Taking out the trash, Peter meets MJ, who has just argued with her father, and they start a dialogue. The girl gets to know the guy better. She sees how Parker sincerely loves her, not a red-headed beauty, but an independent personality. But suddenly Flash arrives in a cool car, and Mary Jane chooses him for now. Peter thinks that by buying an expensive car, he will be able to win her heart. He starts to believe in a lie. Then Parker looks at the prices of cars and realizes that he can't afford anything. Right there, Parker sees an advertisement for a wrestling match. All he needs is a costume. Parker starts making it. In the end, the design turned out great, but the high school student is unlikely to have enough money for the materials. The next day, Peter goes to the fight. Uncle and Aunt are already starting to worry. He tells them he is going to the library. Ben insists on giving him a ride. When they arrive, Uncle tries to talk to him, but Peter rudely cuts him off and gets out of the car.
With great power comes great responsibility.
In the evening, he signs up for the fight. When the fight started, Peter only needed to land a couple of kicks to knock out his opponent. When the winner comes for his reward, the organizer gives him only $100, although $3,000 was promised. Parker is puzzled and says he needs the money. However,
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Peter leaves from there. At that moment, a robber breaks in and takes all the cash. Parker could stop him, but he takes revenge on the organizer, acting against his conscience, letting the robber go.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Then he goes to his uncle, as he promised to pick up his nephew from the library. However, at the meeting place, Parker sees his lying uncle in a pool of blood. They say their goodbyes and Ben dies. It turns out he was shot to steal the car. Peter flies after the killer. Catching up with the criminal, Parker realizes that it's the same robber he let go, and it was only because of Peter that his uncle died. The killer accidentally stumbles and falls from a great height, after which he dies. Ben's death weighs heavily on Peter, as he has now lost his closest person. Meanwhile, Osborn attacks Oscorp's rivals and destroys all their technologies. At home, grieving for his uncle, Parker remembers his words about responsibility and takes out the old costume designs. Thus, Spider-Man is born, now fighting crime and saving people. Once, a group of criminals robbed a bank, taking a huge amount of money there, after which they flew away in a helicopter, but they didn't manage to escape, and Spidey catches them, wrapping them up in webs between the Twin Towers. The scene was filmed before the tragedy of 9/11. By the way, shots with the Twin Towers appeared from time to time throughout the movie. Mary Jane starts dating Harry. Peter is not too happy about it. Since the main character needs a job, he starts bringing pictures of Spider-Man to the Daily Bugle, to J. Jonah Jameson, who mentions Eddie Brock during a conversation with the staff. This character was supposed to appear in the movie, but the scene with him was deleted, only the photos from the shooting remained. Meanwhile, the bosses of Oscorp secretly sold the company to competitors and kicked Norman out of there. He finds out about it, but there is nothing he can do anymore. Right now in New York, there is a concert where Peter meets Stan Lee, who suggests buying him sunglasses, which would refer to the X-Men. By the way, Hugh Jackman was also supposed to appear in the movie as Wolverine. Suddenly, Norman arrives on his glider and explodes the balcony with guests using a pumpkin bomb. He kills all the Oscorp executives, and the balcony debris falls on people, but Peter saves them. Nearby children witness this. Then Spider-Man tries to stop the Green Goblin, and a battle ensues between them. Peter manages to damage the glider. In the evening, Norman hears a voice in his head. Osborn goes mad. Now he plans to ally with Spider-Man to become even stronger. Peter tries to sell his photos to Jameson again, when suddenly the Goblin appears out of nowhere and threatens Jonah, asking who takes the spider pictures. Peter interrupts them, but Norman puts him to sleep. When he wakes up, the villain tries to make an alliance, but Peter refuses. The villain gives him a few days to think it over. After some time, he sees Mary Jane being harassed by thugs. Peter doesn't have time to put on his mask, rushes to save her, and the girl thanks him. The next day, Spider-Man rescues people from burning building. The Goblin disguises himself as an old lady, then attacks Peter, but Peter manages to escape. Now he's having lunch with Norman, Aunt May, MJ, and Harry. At the table, the Goblin notices a wound on Peter's arm, inflicted by Osborn during their fight. Realizing that Peter is Spider-Man, Norman leaves the apartment. At night, the Green Goblin frightens Aunt May, nearly to death, causing her to end up in the hospital. Later, Harry tells his father about Peter's love for Mary Jane. While at the hospital, Parker calls the girl, but someone else picks up the phone. It's the Goblin. The villain has kidnapped her, and she is now on a bridge. Immediately, Spider-Man swings there. After the fight begins, Osborn throws the hero into an abandoned building. He brutally beats him, but eventually, Peter, fighting with all his strength, defeats Norman. Norman tries to deceive Peter and distract him, then launches the glider straight at Parker. He dodges, and Norman dies from his own weapon. Spider-Man brings his body home, witnessed by Harry. Now Osborn Jr. believes that Spider-Man killed his father. After the funeral, Mary Jane confesses her love to Peter, but he rejects her in order to protect her from danger, because with great power comes great responsibility. In reality, the 2002 Spider-Man movie has the least significant deleted material among all other films. Spider-Man 2. For this film, the studio even released an extended version that includes all the deleted scenes, so let's take a look at that.
I'm Spider-Man, given a job to do. And I'm Peter Parker. And I too have a job.
Peter Parker.
Brilliant but lazy.
He never learned how to balance superhero life with his personal life, so everything always goes wrong. If Spider-Man succeeds, Parker fails, and he constantly has to sacrifice something. Right now, Peter needs to deliver pizza in 7 minutes, or he will lose his job. As he's on the road, he has to save some kids from a truck, which makes him late, and here's where the extended scene comes into play. Essentially, it just slowed down the plot, as the moment was too long. Long story short, Peter fails to deliver the pizza on time, and as a result, he loses his job. Once again, Spider-Man messed up Parker's life, so the guy goes back to selling photos of the web-slinger to the Daily Bugle, thereby tarnishing his superhero reputation. When he gets home, Peter realizes that today is his birthday, and May, MJ and Harry throw him a surprise party. Osborn still believes that it was Spider-Man who killed his father, because Parker never explained anything to his friend. Their friendship is getting worse. Osborn compares his father's killer, that is Parker, to the robber who shot Uncle Ben, and says he feels the same way about him as Peter does about his uncle's killer. Of course, the guy understands his best friend, and Harry says that Parker was like a son to Norman. However, Harry still invites Peter to meet his idol, the scientist Otto Octavius. Parker sees Mary Jane. She talks about how Peter has always inspired her. Like a long time ago, they try to have a heart-to-heart conversation, but it doesn't work out. He can't put the girl in danger and be with her, even though he loves her deeply. The next day, Peter finally meets Otto, who is about to make a great discovery. After hours of conversation, the scientist invites the young man to tomorrow's presentation. Naturally, the student agrees. After a day, the show begins. At first, everything goes quite well. Octavius demonstrates his high-tech tentacles with built-in artificial intelligence. To prevent them from overpowering the creator's brain, a chip inhibitor protects him from them. However, the setup starts malfunctioning and attracts metal objects towards itself. The debris kills Otto's wife, Rosie, and then the chip breaks. Luckily, Spider-Man arrives and shuts down the machine. The scientist is taken to the hospital. Surgeons try to cut off Octavius' tentacles, but in vain. Otto begins to brutally kill everyone. By the way, in the extended scene, you can really feel Sam Raimi's style. Murdering all the doctors, he heads to some abandoned building, and then decides to finish the experiment. At the same time, Jameson assigns Parker to be the photographer at his son's wedding. Dr. Octopus needs money to carry out his plan, so he goes to rob a bank. Unfortunately for him, at the moment, Peter and his aunt are there. Spidey tries to stop the villain, and a small fight breaks out, during which the opponents even hit the building and fought inside. Eventually, the scientist escapes with his stolen money. During class, Peter can't stop thinking about Mary Jane and draws her in his sketches. The creators literally show what Dr. Connors talked about: Peter's constant fatigue, lack of focus in class, and so on. Over time, Parker begins the worst evening of his life. Not only did he quarrel with his best friend, was humiliated, and couldn't take his cocktail, but also his dream girl marries another guy and rejects Peter. Filled with anger, Parker puts on his suit and starts flying over the city, but suddenly he loses his powers, along with losing the motivation to continue being Spider-Man. After all, it only brings him trouble. Peter gives up, which only makes him happy. Life finally gets better. Now Parker can focus on his personal life and nothing will interfere with it anymore. For the first time, Peter even attends a play with MJ, something the girl has been waiting for. Their relations finally start to get better. After some time, a garbage collector finds the discarded Spider-Man suit and brings it to Jameson. Jonathan secretly tries on the suit, jumping around his office. Meanwhile, Harry, consumed by vengeance against Spider-Man, strikes a deal with Octavius. Osborn provides him with all the resources he needs, and in return, Octavius brings him the web-slinger. Due to his departure from being a superhero, crime is on the rise in New York. Peter is conflicted. What should he do? On one hand, his personal life is free from major problems, but on the other hand, he feels responsible for people's lives. After all,
with great power comes great responsibility.
Walking down the street, Parker notices a burning building with a little child trapped inside. Without any superpowers, he manages to save the girl. However, there were other people in the house who unfortunately perished. Peter couldn't save them, but if he were Spider-Man, they would still be alive. Peter is tormented by guilt. Visiting Aunt May, he learns that she is planning to move, and along with the neighbor boy, they wonder, where did Spider-Man go? Then she says,
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
Peter finally understands his purpose. Therefore, he decides to reclaim his superpowers and climbs onto the roof to, like before, leap to another building. But it's not that simple, so the attempt failed. By this time, Dr. Octopus has already fully assembled the new setup. Now he has to take Spidey to Osborn. Next, there is a conversation between MJ and her friend while shopping, where she talks about Mary Jameson's son and how much he loves her, and how her father was wrong about her. But her friend doubts that John is the one, making MJ think. Meanwhile, Mary Jane invites Peter to a cafe and confesses her love to him. However, Peter again rejects her, causing a car to immediately fly towards him, Otto through the car. He tells Peter to find the Spider-Man and throws him against the wall, and he takes Mary Jane with him. Well, Spider-Man is back. A battle ensues between the enemies. Octavius throws Peter off the roof, but he takes the villain with him. They land on a moving train. During the intense fight, Dr. Octopus breaks the speed regulating system. The train now is moving at maximum speed. However, after exerting all his strength, Peter manages to stop it. Otto takes advantage of this and knocks out Spider-Man. Then he brings the hero's body to Osborn. Harry, wanting to see who is hiding under the mask, tears it off. Seeing his best friend's face, he is shocked. Now he believes that Parker killed Norman. Without explaining anything, Peter flies to the scientist, who is already about to start the experiment. He fails to save Mary Jane, so Otto notices him. Beating Dr. Octopus, Parker realizes he doesn't know how to disable the setup, so he turns to Octavius. Removing his mask in front of him, Peter repeats Aunt May's words, thus calling on the scientist to reason. Octavius decides to drown the setup, sacrificing himself. MJ learns that Parker was Spider-Man all along. They fly away, and Peter hands her over to her future husband. Meanwhile, Harry hallucinates his father, who calls on his son to avenge his death. Osborn Jr. smashes the mirror and sees the Green Goblin suit there, and Mary Jane's wedding is today. But she simply didn't come, but ran away in her wedding dress to Parker. He was against their relationship. However,
I love you.
And the movie ends with Peter's triumphant flight on the web. He's Spider-Man after all. Well, in my opinion, this is the best Spider-Man movie in terms of the script, a benchmark for superhero cinema, and an example of a good film, and no deleted scenes will make this already great film any better.